Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. We'll give everyone just a few moments to get settled, grab your glass of water. I don't know if our panelists or Phil, if you need anything. Oh, we're all set. So we'll just give everyone another 30 seconds or so to get in. So while we're waiting, Phil and Alena, how are you both doing on this fine Thursday?
Great. You're farther ahead on time, so you go first.
Yeah, it's an evening for me, Phil, right? Was a long day, a lot of meetings, but I feel energized.
So I'm teaching implementing SAFe 6.0 today. We've been teaching it this week, and it's been pretty awesome. We had one of our SPCT candidates, Travis Moore, jump in for an hour and 15 minutes to cover the class while I'm here. So I'm stoked. I'm excited about SAFe 6.0. And I was actually, before we started, I was asking Alena, what do you love about SAFe 6.0? Because it's here now, right? And it's different and it's cool and it's awesome. There's 5 things I love about it, but I'll save that for a blog sometime. But what's the thing you love the most about SAFe 6.0, Alena, while we're waiting for people to join?
Yeah, the flow accelerators, right? And especially time on the zone, which is really, I think, very important personally to understand it and incorporate it into the activities the teams are doing. And actually, the accelerators is something I think the leaders and the executives, they can really relate to it and understand it. And really early in the transformation, really, they can get some actionable items which are not easy, but easy to understand and easy to start working on, right? Which is really, really fantastic from my perspective.
Flow. I love it.
Well, that kind of ties right into how I was going to introduce you, Alena. As the head of the LACE for Vodafone, I know that your passion around growing change agents and definitely working with leaders around what lean agile leadership looks like is really part of the magic that you're bringing to organizations. And so we are so happy that you're here and joining Phil in this. I just want to welcome everybody who's joining to this, one of our episodes in the series of I'm an SPC. The series is led by Phil Gardiner. Phil is our practice lead here at Applied Frameworks. As the SAFe practice lead, he helps to kind of bring examples from the field, really to kind of further the thinking around agility and business agility, more broadly for the Agile community. So this webinar series is really designed to bring voices from the field and provide some really kind of practical, best practices, lessons learned, good practices, all those kinds of things. And so this particular topic, we're going to be exploring from a SAFe practice consultant's perspective, the role that an SPC can play when you're supporting the development and the growth of a LACE. So Alena, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. I think this is going to be a great conversation. And Phil, as the SAFe practice lead and one of our SPCTs here, actually our first SPCT that we had at Applied Frameworks, I'm just grateful that you bring these kinds of conversations to the community. So I don't want to take too much more time other than to say that Applied Frameworks loves to host these kinds of conversations, and my role will be in the background. We're recording this, so for any folks who need to listen to this later or have to leave early, it will be shared. But please, as you have questions, put them into the Q&A. And my job is now, as I turn this over to Phil and Alena, I'm just going to be looking at the Q&A and making sure that I inject questions from people in the audience so that you two can kind of talk about that and share your experiences.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm really humbled to be here. I was talking to one of the SAFe fellows, somebody that's one of my SAFe heroes, Harry Konerman, last night, and just thinking about my own journey. Right, I'm hitting that 10-year mark with SAFe. And what got me here was community. And so I'm so honored to be able to give back by having this series where it's like, hey, you're an SPC, or maybe you're leveraging SPCs, you need to hire SPCs, you're thinking about becoming an SPC, and you want multiple perspectives. Community brings you that perspective, right? I teach classes and I do talks, but that's one opinion, right? When I think about my own journey, it started in 2013 and I met just these thought leaders, M. Campbell Pretty, Mark Richards, individuals from Scaled Agile like Jennifer Fawcett and Dean and Imbar, and those individuals, and hearing their stories, hearing their perspectives, I can't explain just how deep and profound that's had on me as an individual and as a professional. And so I'm so proud to have Alena on here. You meet people along your journey and you remember some of them, right? So Alena, I met her in, I believe it was June of 2019, I think. And
Yep.
I was going through what we call immersion week. I was an SPCT prospect, and then I became a nominee. And you go through this week-long immersion week where kind of like that crucible, and you come out on the other side, hopefully, as an SPCT candidate. And part of that is that they funnel a lot of the questions to you. And what I remember about that class is that Rochelle Maurer and Alena Keck, the two of them just peppered me with the hardest questions. And you're sitting there in front of a panel of people assessing how you answer questions about the framework. And so that's where I met Alena, and it's been awesome to see her journey. She is, there's a subcommunity out there, Women in Agile. She's part of that Women in Agile. There's, I think about how many of my new safe heroes are women, and Dima Dajani, Audrey Boyston, Cheryl Krupe, Rebecca Davis, all sorts of people. So it's really great to see somebody in this leadership role who's really done so much great stuff. So yes, an Alena fan. Sorry, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, Phil, I also remember the summer where we met, and I was on my SPC training, right? And I really wanted to get this training from Dean Leffingwell, because I really believe that he has so much to give to his students, and really so much passion to really share with others. So I wanted to come to Boulder and get through this journey, and this is how we got to know each other. And now this December, I also was in my immersion week, unfortunately not in Boulder, but all remote. And I also got out of it as an SPCT candidate, which is really, really great.
Yeah, it all comes around, right? And so maybe there's somebody in the audience here who's going to learn from you, and a year from now, 2 years from now, they're leading the lace somewhere, and they're the head of the lace for someplace. So enough on the intro. Sorry about that. As you can see, I really believe in the community, and it's about people. So we're going to kind of have a conversation around some of these topics. The first one really is, how do you get the lace started, and how does it evolve over time? What's been your experience with that?
So Phil, I have a couple of experiences from my previous role and also from my role at Vodafone right now. And I think a powerful lace starts with a strong leader who understand the business, understand the pain points in the business, and really understand the why we need to transform the business. And in some of the previous company, what I saw working very well, to have one leader from technology and one from business paired from the very beginning to drive the transformation together, to be on stage all the time as a pair of business and technology, and really showing the commitment of both sides for this transformation. So I think leadership and strong leadership at the beginning is a key. And then you need a cross-functional team. And you normally start with a growing cross-functionality within your team. You start with some SPC who you start growing, upskilling. But the transformation needs much more than SPC knowledge. You need someone who understands change and can drive, for example, very good communication. You need someone who really is very good in stakeholder management. Sometimes if you are in companies like in automotive or companies which has a lot of compliance concerns, you need someone who understands tooling or quality or process experts on your team to be trustworthy, right? Otherwise, the LACE team will be maybe considered as not very trustworthy if we are only talking about the ceremonies and principles in an environment which really needs to operate in a very strict regulatory and compliance and include those concerns. So cross-functional team, I think, is the second piece of the success. And then the team needs to evolve. You need to include some leaders, so not only have someone who is able to teach or to provide coaching to your agile release trains, but also on board some of the line managers, some of the leaders. And as your transformation is evolving, you will need other skills, other areas, or maybe other experts to really come onto your journey and help you in a swarm concept, right? Sometimes your LACE will grow. Sometimes some people in some areas, they will mature and you will need other skills. Like, for example, if you realize that DevOps is your problem area, that you might need some coaching and some advice there, or it might evolve in a very, very different direction.
But when I hear you talk about that, and thank you for sharing all that great advice, the word that pops into my mind is perspective, and specifically perspectives, right? And in my own experience with LACEs, you mentioned something very powerful there, which is it's okay to get other people in there. It's okay to not have just SPCs, right? So, this whole series is called the SPC Journey. And I like to say that getting your SPC is the beginning of a journey, not the end of it, right? And so just because you have the SPC certification does not mean you've got experience managing complicated stakeholder situations, or that you have experience with DevOps, or you have experience with LPM. Now, the great thing about being an SPC is there's all sorts of resources, both in the community, on New Safe Studio, and things like that to grow those skills. And we'll talk a little bit later about how to grow and develop SPCs. The other thing you mentioned that I just want to piggyback on is this idea of you need a leader familiar with the business. And somebody familiar with inside, right? I'm an outside consultant now. I started my journey at AT&T as an internal change agent, right? And, being an internal change agent has a whole bunch of benefits and a whole bunch of challenges, just like being a consultant has a whole bunch of benefits and a whole bunch of challenges. But I share your belief there that the internal person, you need somebody internal to lead your LACE, because it's your transformation as a company, not ours as an external partner. The other thing I think was really powerful that you said that I want to say that I want to pull that string on a little bit more, and that's that when we look at that partnership between business and technology, one of the coolest things about SAFe 6.0 in my mind is this little article in the bottom left corner of the framework big picture. It says business and technology. If you click that link, you'll see a bunch of patterns that move SAFe beyond just IT. And if you can start that when you first get going, those implementations that I think about that are still running today after years, it's ones where you had that partnership together. And how do you, when we talk about getting the LACE started, how do you actually, and any tips or advice on an SPC or somebody involved in a LACE on how you might bridge that conversation and get the business and technology leaders to be engaged and take control?
So in my previous experience, from the very beginning, we paired the agile transformation with digital transformation. And if you do that, then I think it's a natural desire from the business side to really make the digital acceleration possible, right? And if you really connect with digital products, with how you want to scale them on a global basis, how you want to drive customer satisfaction with those new products, and how you really want to drive excitement and connect the digital transformation with agile transformation, I think this resonates to both business and technology. And this was one of the cases where it was easier for us, whether it was a digital solution center, which I was part of, or digital product organization I was part of. This was kind of designed in because the agile transformation was part of digital strategy or digital transformation. So the strategy of the business was to digitize enterprise, and the way of working was chosen was the agile way of working.
Awesome. Thank you. So on that note about executives, right? I mean, I think about my own journey, right? And I'm a transparent guy. My first experience with senior execs, my first experience with in an agile context with a officer of the corporation at AT&T, it was basically Dean Leffingwell came out to visit AT&T, and we had a new officer, and he replaced our old Lean Agile leader. And this is a new, more traditional leader. And we went from, we hit 240% of our plan with SAFe. And then the next year we got a new leader, and he came in, he's like, okay, we did 50 projects last year, so we're going to do 500 this year. And I'm sitting there going, whoa, how are we going to, we can only hire a couple more people, 100 more people. How is that possible, right? Dean Leffingwell is right there in the middle of the, he's in there in the room with the officer and his directs. And I set up this question. I'm like, Dean, what would you say if I told you that we have 800 people in our organization and we did 50 projects last year and we're signing up for 500 this year? And Dean's like, that would just be blank stupid, right? And I'm staring daggers into the officer's eyes as I say that, right? That's not how to do it, right? So I got positive reinforcement for that negative behavior, and that we ended up doing a portfolio workshop. But when we talk about engaging executives, it's more about meeting them where they are. What tips and tricks do you have for SPCs and those on their journey on how do you get them engaged and keep them engaged?
Yeah, I think it is really, really hard, and there is no silver bullet. You need to be very creative and very resilient, and start and continue asking and keeping trying to find the way to engage. But what I mentioned previously, right? This a leader needs to have an understanding, leading a lace of the business. And coming from many years of automotive and changing to telecom, I did not have this business knowledge. So when I joined Vodafone, the first 90 days, I really spent interviewing our CIOs from different markets, some other executive and stakeholders, to understand what are the pain points, what are the success factors, what do they think is the most important thing to do. So I took all those notes. I really had tons of notes, tons of interviews, which I conducted. And then I summarized it as a SWOT analysis for transformation and presented it to our CIO and CTO, right? So this was the first thing which I did. What I'm doing right now is you cannot have the engagement of all executives if it's not relevant for them all at the same time. So you need to maybe pick one and make it successful for this one person and pair with this one executive. So what I created and pitched actually today again in one of the senior leadership meetings was the transformation champion concept. We created this concept as we realized that some of the transformation were lacking exactly the executive leadership, and the teams hit the ceiling very fast what they can do. So we came to our CTO and his leadership team and said, what we need to do is we need to have a commitment from one of the executives to help support the transformation, help to remove impediments, and help to set the vision for this transformation, for this huge initiative. And we got the buy-in from one of them. We created a concept, what would be in scope of our collaboration, how we will collaborate, and how this person would nominate some of the people from his areas for us to be into our counterpart on an everyday basis. And we also pitched it today again in our leadership meeting, how we are collaborating right now, how we are driving success, and started this journey together. So this would be the second format which I tried out right now. What we did in I think last month, myself and one of my colleagues, we had empathy mapping. So basically we took one of the executive and some of our colleagues from the leadership team, they interviewed us, and we were thinking about this person and saying, okay, what does he see? What does he, what does he hear? And through this conversation, we kind of unpicked a lot of things. Like, for example, we really need to strongly connect to the goals and really goals of this leader, speak the language of the goals, and really understand what was in his goals agreement for this year and what will be in his goals agreement next year. So this types of thing would be one of my suggestions, and bringing the transformation topic on the agenda for your senior leadership meetings on a regular basis with whatever topic is relevant, but just trying to get on this agenda. And the last one, I think, LPM concept, the lean portfolio management as a as a construct, it's the first time when leaders really need to get their hands dirty around something, right? And if they have to do it like this understanding or like participatory budgeting, which we are conducting, like, you need to be engaged, or like if you're not engaged, if you do not allocate the budget, or if you're not in this meeting, you kind of lost your chance, right? So like engagement there is mandatory. So those are the things we tried, but it is really hard, and yeah, there is no silver bullet. I think.
Well, you said I apologize if I dropped connection there for a second. You said some really powerful things there. One of the first words that stuck out was you said the word resiliency, right? And, you know, as somebody who leads a LACE and somebody who's been in a similar role and coached people in that role, that's a powerful attribute for the head of a LACE to have, because you're not going to get a bunch of yeses all the time, right? Tenacity is important. The other thing you mentioned that I really want to just second in my personal experience, you know, I'm a huge fan of stories, and you know, you're on here telling some of your stories, right? And what I found is that those stories are gold, right? And it's like, if I tell a story, it's one thing. If the leader tells the story, it's something just so much more powerful, right? So I'm a big fan of Gemba walks, and at AT&T, we implemented LPM first. It was back in 2017, so it wasn't a popular thing. It wasn't the top of the roadmap yet, but I've experienced the same thing you experienced, which is give them something to do. They get their hands dirty, right? And there was such a visceral reaction from the staff when they saw, an officer of the company, kneeling down, putting blue painter's tape up on the wall because they were building out their portfolio Kanban flow and putting all the sticky notes representing the existing projects at the time, right? And we did a swim lane for existing projects and a swim lane for epics. But what was so cool about that is that we had people coming down from different floors in the AT&T tower checking it out. And the first time I gave a tour of what was happening. But then the second time I'm like, hey, I'm Phil, but Vanessa here or Amy here can give you the rest, right? And then ended up becoming a thing where executives were coming from all over the building to come see this new and different stuff that the cybersecurity business was doing. And so if you can get one win with one of those executives, they can become that person who tells the stories, right? And I've seen you've had some of your customers speak at the SAFE Summit or some of the companies you've worked with, and it's very powerful when the person's talking and not the consultant. So thanks for the tips on that. Speaking of tips and tricks, you mentioned something earlier that I think people don't really always think about from a LACE perspective, right? Oftentimes the LACE forms and it's all about launching that first agile release train, the art readiness checklists and stuff. There's a strategic component to that. Communication strategy. Strategy is it's the plan to accomplish our vision and our mission, right? And so tell me more about tips and tricks for communication as the leader of a LACE.
There is no successful transformation without successful communication, right? So you need to have a good communication strategy for different audiences and different stakeholders, right? You need to have a broad communication. For example, what we have a variety of resources. We have a SharePoint, we have a channel where we post a lot of things internally. We have our system demos. We operate as a transformation agile release train. And once per PI, we have a public demo, right? So that people can join and can really understand what we are doing. And there, again, it's not all the time us talking. We invite our customers, so the programs, to talk about us, right? Or to get their perspective or their view on how we are helping them. Or we have snack sessions, which are called sharing newly acquired knowledge. And here, last time we shared how we implemented the 10 Safe Essentials diagnostic in one of the Agile Release Train. And again, we paired with some leaders there so that they can give their perspective. And we are just methodically rounding it up and saying what would be our recommendation. So this is more a broad communication. And as you see in the background, the Vodafone Agile Conference, it was like a huge, gigantic format, which we were preparing month together as a big setup team to really make it bring it to life, where everyone can talk about their stories. Everyone had different tracks to have different workshops, join and listen from our CTO, from our leaders from the organization, their view of what is lean and agile leadership, or what are OKRs and how they can help us. So really this variety of broad communication topics are key, but you also need to have an executive communication, right? Getting on the agenda of their meetings, right, on a regular basis with a small update. And again, here, like today I did one, and I brought someone from our key initiative so that I only did maybe the introduction and the small wrap up from the last one, explaining the context, and then I hand over to this person, and he was talking about the transformation and how we're helping them. And it's much more powerful than me explaining what we did for this initiative, right? So
and you mentioned mentioned that when we first started talking about it's not a one-person job, right? And I love the fact that that communication is going out through many people, through many different many different channels, right? And I love the idea. I've participated in 3 or 4 internal conferences for large corporations and one for the U.S. Air Force, and it's a tremendously cool thing to see when a company has enough agility that they can run their own conference and maybe bring in one or two outside speakers to share in an area that's new. Hey, sign me up for 2020, 2024 if you got a spot. But
that's really cool. We will. And Andrew was talking, as it was last week, Andrew was talking about 6.0 one day after the launch. It was really, really fantastic.
Yeah, that's Andy Sales, one of the chief methodologists at Scaled Agile. You're lucky to have him over there across the pond. Our next topic here is, and by the way, if you have questions as we're going, throw them into chat, right? Alena and I met, and when we talked about, hey, would you mind sharing some of your experiences? She came up with some stuff that we want to talk about together, but it's not limited to that. So we're going to have time for other questions and answers. So, be thinking about what other things you want to talk about. This next one for me is, it's another one that's really a deeply meaningful topic for me, this idea of a pull-based or push-based LACE. So I will tell you, I worked at AT&T for 16 years, and I went through a transformation where we had an army of consultants. We had 29 consultants. These were great Agile team coaches. Came in and stood up 67 Scrum teams. And we had a traditional PMO that did not believe in transparency. And the result was not some good stuff, right? There was not that success. That experience pushed me to look at scaling patterns. But then along the way, we had an Agile community of practice, those individuals across the enterprise that just got bit by this Agile bullet in 2008, 2009, or even earlier. And we had an informal community of practice. We made recommendations for tooling and some things like that. Well, then Agile became a thing. And so that means they assigned a director, right? And a director needs to have direct reports. And so they created this Agile Center of Excellence, right? And fast forward a couple of years, and what we had was what we called the Agile Police, right? And they literally had clipboards, and they would come in. If they heard the word Agile, they would just swarm like locusts, and they would basically have their clipboards, and they're like, okay, I've heard you say the word Scrum, so you need to be assessed. And they would rate you as bronze, silver, or gold level agility. And if you didn't qualify for bronze, you get shut down. Unofficial Agile, violation, shut down, right? And so for me, it was in 2013, I had this opportunity to get involved in a startup inside AT&T where our CTO said, you know what, let's create a place inside AT&T that's nothing like AT&T, right? Let's build our own culture. Let's compete with the startups. This is around big data, and let's get some data scientists in here, right? And AT&T has fantastic data sets, but the culture isn't quite the same as Silicon Valley, right? And so we were able to, we had that top cover to change things. And so I looked at, I saw Dean Leffingwell in 2013 give a presentation on SAFe 2, and I was like, what a masterful way to bypass the Agile Police, because this is not Scrum, and so therefore it's not part of their charter, so they can't control it. And literally that's why I adopted SAFe and became an SPC, so that we could tell the Agile COE, this is SAFe, it's not Scrum. And when I think about that, and years later, I was able to go back and join AT&T as a consultant. And one of the things we helped was helping the Agile COE move from being a push-based COE to a pull-based COE. And there's lots of patterns there. I'm curious if you've seen some of these, like SPCs are in a tower and they write process documents, right? Or SPCs write a SAFe playbook. And you don't go out to the website, look at the playbook first, because the playbook tells us what we're going to do. And if you read that playbook, what you see is, well, Scaled Agile recommends you do this, but that seems uncomfortable. So we're going to just rewrite that and say, instead of having a product manager and a system architect that work together, we're going to have an art owner, right? Okay, and we don't like this, so we're going to do that, right? And you start customizing the framework. So what's your been, and does the happy end of that tale was that they became a pull-based system, and it was somewhere, the ultimate goal you want is, I'm a leader inside the corporation and I'm thinking about Agile. I would be silly not to reach out to the LACE and have them help me understand how to get going, right? You want that level, you want that pull. What are your thoughts and experiences around this?
Yeah, obviously to become agile police would be my horror story, right? Nightmare, which I really, really want to avoid. But I know what you're talking about. And I think we all know that there are examples which are really, really extreme. So I think I can consider that we are very strong in broad communication, and therefore people really know us, know what we are doing. And through, for example, Agile Conference, we announced that we will have some workshop tracks, and they were kind of sold out. They were free, right? But sign up workshop, they were sold out in like 4 hours, right?
Wow.
It was really demonstrating there is a pool for really great workshops from our team, or like PB simulation game, right, which we created for our context, was also sold out. We had to give it twice, one in the morning and one in the evening, because there was a pull for this, right? What else? We have a lot of demands which you can, for example, get on our SharePoint and say you want to sign up for training, or you have a question. We have formats where, for example, like a snack session where you can come and join and ask the question. We have COPs. So this would be supporting the pool. Nevertheless, what I think is important is, as we will always have more demand than capacity, and we are in this situation all the time, if we have demands which are larger than a user story, right, and longer than just a couple of days of work, and really will require a lot of transformation effort, we bring and visualize these demands to our senior leadership team and say, these are all the requests we are getting, which will take us maybe to launch an art, maybe like 6 months, and support it after that a couple of months, and to bring it to the sustain phase. It will take the capacity of the coaches for many, many, many months, right? Mm-hmm. Such demands we bring up, we just try to discuss it within the senior leadership team, so that we can really give an answer that not we are prioritizing the demands, but the senior leadership has an explanation why, for example, this initiative is very important, right? So I would think you still need to have the connection because the demand will be always hopefully higher than the capacity which you have in the team.
Well, you say hopefully. I'll tell you that there's times when it's not, right? There's times when you know, and we've got a question in chat. And it's, have you approached a program with established arts and solution trains that have varying agile maturity states and team complexity, but no LACE to guide them? And what's interesting, and I'll segue to answer that question, is that even if you have a LACE, it doesn't mean you don't have agile popping up in other places, right? So, you know, what I'd share with you is an example of, you know, we had the official agile, the bronze, silver, gold, right? But then over here in this other business unit, in this new emerging market, this H1 focused business segment, we had a whole different type of agile going on. And so, you know, it just because there's a LACE doesn't mean people have to use you. And, you know, one of the things that I've seen in my journey is a situation where it's IT's LACE, and the trust in IT is so low that the business doesn't want to go through the IT LACE, and that's a separate challenge. But speaking to this question here, I'm, you know, you're in the SPCT program right now, right? You're going to be an iSPCT and join the 100 or so people around the world, you know, as that deep safe experts, which is exciting. Well, I was noticing the new requirements that came out. One of those, it talks about this thing called an art relaunch. And what we're seeing now, SAFE's been around for a decade or more, right? Since 2011. And so we're seeing situations where people say they're implementing SAFE, but it's not quite there, right? And so the same practices I would use to talk about how do you tackle this when you don't have a LACE is the same thing I would look at what I call second chance SAFE, right? Or a relaunch or something, which is you're going to need to find, you know, some top cover, find somebody who's willing to put their leadership cred on the line to give you enough to get started, right? And while you can't really have a LACE with one person, you can start with one person's vision and you bring other people in there to help. And even if you're just starting part-time, you can grow from there, right? So for me, it's, you know, if you've got established arts and a LACE, you don't have a LACE to guide them, then you can look at forming that. It can be organic, right? Not all LACEs are funded. And that's something that I talked about in class today, is that sometimes, you know, when you look at charting a LACE, there's a canvas, the LACE canvas. And it has a lot of similarities with the EPIC hypothesis statement from LPM. And I've actually worked with clients where we have an EPIC that goes in through the LPM funnel about the transformation office, right? Or that LACE, because it's an investment. There's a hypothesis, there's an MVP and things like that. What do you have you could share around that, around this idea of varying maturity levels on established arts and solution trains, but no LACE?
Yeah, I think the question also had the second part, right, which I'm also reading right now. So I think I saw this happening in a couple of organizations where I was before. I think in this case, it's really a bottom-up transformation where normally RTEs or maybe STEs are trying to drive as far as they can get, right? But what I would recommend in this situation is really maybe find a leader who feels the pain, right? And who really feels that continuing doing that will not help, and try to connect with the original why. For example, SAFE was implemented, why was, for example, where this arts solution trains were started in the first place, and what was promised at the beginning, and what would help to keep this promise, right? And try to find the leader who would support you, even if it's not a official LACE organization. It doesn't have to be. LACE can be a virtual organization which is really driving the transformation from like doing it as a additional part of the job. And I also was part of such LACE. It is painful because it is really a lot of time commitment, and you need to shuffle the different commitments at the same time, but it's still possible.
I'm looking at I've pasted into chat. I'm not sure if everybody can see the question, so I pasted it into chat so that the person who asked that question, they added some additional context. And when I read that context, what I hear there is, man, they probably need some LPM, right? We've got a large group of established arts, right, for the last 4 years without a LACE to help them align everyone to a common operating rhythm. This has made it very difficult to enable cross-functional integration and program reporting, right? When I hear that cross-functional integration, the LACE can say, hey, here's some ways of working, but then it's the value management office that says, let's help make sure that we're actually working and executing in that new way of working in. And the value management office is part of Agile Portfolio Operations, part of the LPM competency, and the VMO and the LACE are tied very closely together. And what you might find is that the same individuals that build relationships with those senior leaders that can make changes at the portfolio level are oftentimes the same ones that can make decisions and provide great engagement at the LACE level. And so there's a natural piece there. For me, when I read that, I think LPM, that's because, you mentioned earlier, right? LPM brings these people together. It gives them something to roll up their sleeves on, right? Any other thoughts you have on that additional context, Alena?
Let me think about it. I think, as I mentioned, right, LACE doesn't have to be a formal organization. It can be organic and really driven by someone who feels the pain. And if you pull the RTEs together, and if you create this very strong community feeling around them, right? And if you find 1 or 2 leaders who wants to volunteer the time to help, I think you can still drive, you will still hit the ceiling, but you can show some success. So focus on the success areas and what is working, right? I think the biggest difference of between, for example, leading change from Cotter and from Chip and Dan, that Chip and Dan, they're focused really on find the small things which are successful and really replicate them. Don't focus on things which are not working. Just find this one small piece which is working. For example, if an art is predictable or showing better results over time, and really try to replicate, to grow it, and focus on this small item to grow it as large as possible.
Yeah, and Chip and Dan, that's referring to this great book called Switch: How to Change When Change is Hard. Let me move to our next topic here. What capabilities are needed in a LACE team, right? So just quickly, kind of when you think about, gosh, I think I'm thinking about. I mentioned I was talking to Harry last night. Got nostalgic on this 2016 leadership retreat, and Dean had this piece of paper, and he was given an open space. He's like, if you're not doing these 10 things, don't call it safe, right? So what is your list of, if you're not doing these things, don't call it a lace? What comes to mind for you?
I think the capability depend on the why and the scope of the transformation, right? And how you really, for example, if you align agile transformation with digital transformation and, for example, digital strategy, you will need other capabilities. You will need someone representing, for example, the strategy pillar in your team, or someone representing, like, for example, LPM, part of your team and guiding coalition, if you have this approach. If you are in the complex embedded system environment, you really definitely need those tool practitioners and process practitioners and compliance practitioners, right? So this would be the capabilities which are really, really needed. But in a general sense, I think what you should always have, of course, is training and coaching capabilities expressed, for example, in SPCs, but coaching should also not be limited to safe practices, but for example, just design thinking coach could be a great addition for your team, or DevOps practitioner, or like a quality coach, right? They can also become a part of the very, very valuable members of your LACE team. And then I would say methods, practices, metrics, and tooling combined and really brought to life together would be very important to visualize the progress and really connect to some of the metrics to show that the transformation is working, right? Because you might need some tooling to really bring the metrics to life, but you want to have those metrics with the right mindset and the right methods, because otherwise it will be like really a fruit salad with a little bit of veggies and a little bit of meat inside, right? Which would not make a lot of sense. Well, those practices would be very crucial, but also line management, HR, and finance, depending on where you are on the transformation journey, you will not have them at the beginning, or might not always have them at the beginning, right? Yeah. But when you reach this, reach this pain point and really feel the pain, then you will start collaborating with finance, with HR, or what we are doing at Vodafone. We're collaborating with Vodafone Learning Organization to help us set up those trainings, bring them to life, and really, become, for example, Scaled Agile, like an enterprise, safe enterprise for us.
It's interesting. You talked about. SAFE does have a couple really awesome. They aren't classes. Dr. Steve Maynard and a team of people created these things called. It's a series called Leading the Digital Age. There's some really awesome stuff there. I don't want to take us off track here. We have a question that you just touched on tooling. So really quickly, there's a question in chat on program reporting. Any recommendations if you're suffering from a lack of common tooling? I'll tell you, this is one that's usually a longer conversation, but as a LACE. Oh, you just joined Vodafone, right? And there's tools that help you get there, and there's tools that may not help you get there as fast, right? Any suggestions or thoughts regarding, hey, if you inherit a LACE, you join a company, you're taking over the LACE, and their tooling is, what? Any thoughts on that? If you're suffering from a lack of common tooling?
Yeah, we are suffering from like putting everything in one instance, right, and connecting everything. If, for example, if we are working really end to end from global solutions to the markets, in different areas in different markets, it is a challenge, right? Because normally tooling is common in divisions or maybe in big functions, but definitely if you are a large enterprise and if you are also growing through acquisitions, then tooling will always be a challenge, because every acquisition will also bring some other tooling aspects, other instances, and challenges like that. I think on the program level, just use the Excel file from your toolkit where you can put really the metrics for your inspect and adapt, and really every iteration. There are still very, very rudimentary metrics which you can track, right? It's not the most beautiful way to do it, right? And not the most fancy way to do it, but even this Excel file from a toolkit will be better than just doing nothing, right?
Start where you start.
Yeah.
I'm looking at our time. I want to make sure we have time. We've been answering all of our questions as we get them in line. So We're still ticking away here. Let's shift the gears here, right? And this whole series was kicked off where, I've had this belief, I've been saying it till I was blue in the face back in, 13, 14, 15, 16, an SPC is not an SPC is not an SPC, right? And I worked for a partner for a period of years where they believed that, oh, you're transforming, you need 6 SPCs. And the only requirement for being able to serve as an enterprise coach was you had your SPC. And I'm like, for me, it drove me crazy because, the SPC I was in 2014 and the SPC I am now were vastly different, right? And so this whole idea of an SPC journey, when we kicked off this series, it was really about, where do you want to take this? And so when you think about a LACE and you think about SPCs, a couple of questions or a couple of topics around that. One, where do you find these change agents and what do you look for in members of a LACE? And then we'll tie that back into the SPCs in just a moment. But just generally speaking, what do you look for? What characteristics, attributes, skills, where do you find them and what do you look for in change agents and LACE members?
Yeah, I think I mentioned the resilience, right? This is what I'm really, really looking for, because if, for example, some of the change agents were RTEs or Scrum Masters in a couple of in different environment, what they usually experience when they join a LACE team or start working on the enterprise level, they're really shocked how slow things are, right? On the Scrum team level, right? You're moving very fast and see the improvements very fast. On an enterprise level, the speed is much slower. Therefore, this resilience and this ability not to become negative and really focus on the positive things would be something which I would be always looking for, because change is so hard and you need positive people around you within the LACE team, because everyone else, because people are in this frustration phase or really depression phase when change is starting, you will not be surrounded with the positivity outside of the LACE team all the time. So you need to have it within the team to really stay strong and support each other when times are hard and change is hard, and you have 100 people in the new art which are all coming through this roller coaster of change and now in the depression state, right? So you need this positivity. Where we find change agent, a lot of people like RTEs or a lot of even line managers, if they feel the pain, right, and if they want to drive the change, they would be volunteering their time on top of everything they're doing because they believe in it. This would be, I think, the best one to really get into your LACE. But also, if you have this transformation champion, which I was talking about, or some senior leaders, people they trust and ask them to nominate those people, right?
Yep.
Because if they trust these people, right, then they will trust to what you are doing with those people, right? So this is something that this would be to,
That's a fantastic point. You're accelerating trust, right? Because they've already built trust, so you don't have to start from scratch on that. What about, let's talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, the whole idea of SPCs, right? So I'm currently working with some other people at Scaled Agile, and I talked to Andy and Rebecca Davis and stuff about this idea of a SPC measure and grow, right? And I know you and I have had conversations about part of what brought us together here. And this idea that being an SPC, it's the beginning, right? And so, the new responsibility wheels, one of the awesome things about SAFe 6.0 is the responsibility wheels. If you look at that responsibility wheels, coaching flow, accelerating business agility, there's a variety of responsibilities that an SPC can have, and they're not going to be a master of all to begin with. How do you grow and develop your SPCs as part of your LACE?
So yeah, they don't grow on trees, and they do not come certified with all the knowledge which we need for transformation. Therefore, you really need to have a upskilling plan or upskilling ideas which are consistently driving their skills in different areas. So we are using different things. For example, as I came to Vodafone, one of the things which we were using the coaching wheel, which is really framework agnostic. And everyone could do a self-assessment from the coaches and start figuring out what would be the areas they want to focus on within the upcoming month, how we can help with those, and really having the focus where they think they will need to grow. This would be what I try to drive is upskilling through the community platform very strongly. So, for example, recommending the value stream mapping learning journey, value stream identification journey. So all of those really fantastic journeys which were built up, and SPC beta, which was available a couple of months ago. So our trainers and our coaches went through this journey last year to get the theoretical knowledge. It doesn't mean that they are able to practice all of that, right? But it creates a good foundation for them to start trying for the very first time. And also what we start doing are the pairings of different people with different skills for trainings, for coaching activities. Sometimes, for example, I would pair for the first value stream mapping activity with some of the coaches, and then they can pick it up. And what we also did is we created our LACE COP, where we bring the topics. And as I mentioned at the beginning, SPC skills should not only be SPC and SAFE specific, but communication and stakeholder management are the skills which a lot of people are struggling when they operate on the enterprise level, and when they really need to act on the executive or senior leadership level. And this stakeholder management skills. So what we did, we exchanged ideas and what went wrong in some of the initiatives. What can we do better? Really, everyone brought not only the positive examples, but also even myself, I brought examples which didn't go well.
Yeah, and people learn from those. I mean,
we laughed and learned from that, which was really great.
Yeah, and as you share those flubs on your own career, it makes it safe to be able to tell the others. And I definitely get the sense, and from our previous conversations, that being part of the Vodafone LACE is a psychologically safe place where you can learn and grow, and that's what this is all about. I'll tell you that I've had the honor of mentoring people, not only as SPCs, but as SPCTs, right? And kind of along that journey. And, if you have that opportunity to find somebody who's willing to pair with you, to give you some advice, I think back to there's this wonderful gentleman, Martin Burns, who's since passed, but he encouraged me to get involved in the global SAFE community. And meeting Martin, connected me to people like M. Campbell Priddy and Mark Richards and Eric Willicke and others. And those you'd be surprised at how much you can learn from a 5, 10, 15-minute conversation with somebody who's got years of experience on you. And when I think about, for me, what I think about, and one of my mentors, we talk about, what do you look for in an executive consultant, right? And for me, the first word that pops into mind is humility. Right. And for this guy, the first word that pops into mind for him is swagger. And, we had an interesting conversation about, talking with executives. Do you need, we ended up landing on, you need to have humble with swagger, right? You need to, and the point on that is that I totally agree. There's so many soft skills, right? And that lean agile leadership side of things. So I think we've gotten through our topics. We've got a couple minutes left. We've got one question in chat here. And a couple here, right? So here's the first one. And at a broad level, what are common resistors in agile transformation initiatives? And, maybe share one or two that you've seen and how you've overcome them.
Yeah, I think if I pick really on the initiative level, right, then this idea that you can cherry pick some of the principles or cherry pick some of the go with SAFE. This would be a big anti-pattern, and what we really try to say, okay, the principles are connected. We have system thinking. You cannot just pick one piece and think that you will have the whole full house. So this is something which we are facing, and one of the things which we did was really to get them back to reality and do like 10 SAFE essentials self-diagnostic, right? So this would be number one. The second part resistor would be really to let LACE own the transformation. So everyone thinks that if there are problems or if there is anything that LACE need to own it, LACE enables the transformation, but the ownership from day one, you need to partner with delivery organization and let them understand that the ownership of the transformation, the success and the metrics, they are in their hands. we can help them to reach this. We can coach them. We can really explain them or pair with them. But the success of the transformation is in their hands, and we are an enablement team, right?
I love that term, right? You're a resilient enablement team to help them, right? And that's, I share that same perspective as an outside consultant, right? And, you know, as a LACE, you may say, hey, business unit, this is your transformation. It's not ours. We'll enable you along the way. I will share one of my own, right? And a common resistor I talk about is, you know, I've got an iPhone here, right? And my beautiful family on it. But, you know, there's this idea of, there you go, Nikki and Sam, but there's this iPhone versus Android, right? Don't get into that conversation. And one of the things I love, it started in SAFe 5, and it's even more so with SAFe 6.0, is this idea of it's not about SAFe, right? SAFe's the vehicle. It's a proven vehicle that will help you accomplish get to business agility and accelerate business agility, but it's not the goal in itself. And so one of the big resistors I get is, well, I've heard less is better. I've heard Scrum at Scale or Flex or Nexus, whatever, right? It's like, it doesn't matter what vehicle we want. We're trying to go on family vacation right now, right? We're thinking about Disney and Orlando. We're not thinking about 2017 Ford Escape, right? And so SAFe's a reliable vehicle that you can take. And so one thought there is to frame it up that way. We got one more question here. At a broad here, maybe talk about the ceremonies a LACE has. You know, like for me, when I think about a LACE, I run a LACE as an Agile team. I'll tell you also at a certain level of scale, I personally recommend that you have features and you have stories, right? And we typically will have here's the transformation backlog of features, and those communicate with senior execs and stakeholders about what we're doing kind of quarter over quarter. And then we've got the execution, the GSD side of the transformation, where I oftentimes find ourselves in a continuous flow model where we have our weekly, what are we getting done this week kind of thing. That's the pattern that I usually recommend for our clients. But what have you seen? What are those ceremonies that the LACE has there at Vodafone?
So you're right, LACE needs to eat their own dog food or drink their own champagne, right? Very important, and we need to operate as an agile team. What I find more powerful, in addition to operating as agile team, to connect to other parts. Like, for example, in our transformation arc, we also have APMO team members. We have communication as a shared service. We have, for example, strategic element in the finance. We have connection to other parts of the organization. This would make your transformation guiding coalition bigger, and the impact which you can generate bigger, right? But
bigger. You've got an art for your transformation now, right? What are the, so since you have a transformation art, I mean, are you running it where you've got art sync and Scrum of Scrums and PO sync?
We have POPM sync. We have an art sync where we plan features, right? We have a roadmap of features. We have acceptance criteria for features. On the story level, we have less discipline with acceptance criteria because we are operating with using objectives. We are using the features as our main concept and PI objectives, and how we get there, the user story, and really detailing out every user story is still our learning journey, right? How to slice it. And we are bringing, as I said, our demands, for example, to the leadership team before the next PI planning. We're saying this is the capacity we have. Please prioritize what would be the most important initiatives. And then we take it into our planning, right? So those are the ceremonies which we're using, and the system demo, which I mentioned, where everyone can join and really see how we're progressing, ask questions, and really understand how we're driving transformation.
So in summary, the LACE is an agile team or an agile team of teams, and you use the same concepts. If you're using SAFe Team Kanban or SAFe Scrum or an agile release train construct, it's the same ceremonies. So we're at our time box here. I just want to say, Alena, it has been a joy to have you here talking with us today. You know, great insights. You know, it's personally, it's awesome to see how you've grown on your journey. You know, and it's just there's just an awesomeness to know that Vodafone's got such a talented woman leading their LACE. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Phil, for inviting me, and I'm sure we will stay in touch.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.